So we're going to go into our next panel. It's called Trust, Time, and Taste. These three T's are really important, especially that last T, taste. It's so amazing that we're finding taste. We all have our own taste, but today we're going to find out a little bit more about others' taste. Basically, this panel is about, looking at digital art over time. So for those of you that just joined us now today, we're looking at over 70 years of art, art that's been created digitally. So we've talked this morning thus far about protocols and autonomous systems. We just talked about craft with Def Beef and Seth Goldstein. I know a lot of you guys were very inspired by the word prompt and what prompting means. Right now we're going to go into taste and time and trust. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce an amazing panel. We have representatives as collectors, as different corporate collections as well, and Eleonora Brizi is gonna join us today. We have here today Eleonora Brizi, who's an amazing curator, also one of the founders of 100 Collectors. Definitely check that out. They have a lot of great programming this week. I just was with them in Art Dubai. They had an amazing program where they took people on tours. So if you don't know about 100 Collectors, definitely check them out. We also have Rani here from Arab Bank, Switzerland. Just had a great exhibition in NFC Lisbon with Nina Roars. Nina can't be here today, but they also have a presentation at Art Basel Social Club. We also have Michael Bogan here as well, amazing collector. I got to meet Michael last summer and really doing some amazing things with education. We also have two other great collectors. We have the Funny Guys, who's part of La Random and Raster, as well as GMSPACE. But without further ado, Eleonora, can you please take us into trust, time, and taste? Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having us. This is another big topic. Everyone coming on stage talks about the fact that it will take 5 days. So it's going to be the same for us, but we'll try to summarize it somehow. So the presentations were already done. Being the panel about trust, I just wanted to introduce it in this way. Obviously, not the whole, like the art that we will talk about is necessarily related to the blockchain, because we also have the before the blockchain times, digital art represented here today. But the blockchain somehow did technically solved the trust kind of issue and problem, creating an environment where we all operate, like through cryptography and decentralized mechanisms of consensus, so we can operate in a trustable space. But then when it comes to art and really like I put, like collecting, for instance, that I put into human activities, art, trust is really goes back to like building trust with people, and it can be with a community, it can be with institutions, it can be amongst communities. So it is still very human, and also being this a very special place because the space is very new. It gets built day after day, and with completely like new and contemporary technologies, it is even harder to obviously like talk about trust and build trust without having too many examples from previous history, because we operate in a very new space. So that's what we will discuss today, like how all of you from very different perspectives are building trust in the space, and what it is for you as collectors, like to trust this environment where you collect. So, for instance, so Rani, like you created the collection of Arab Bank of Switzerland, which is one of the first banks in Europe that uses like NFTs also as a form of investment and engagement, so also for like your clients. And so the collection itself becomes a form of institutional and educational infrastructure. And then we have Michael through Ragnar Digital, that you build a collection which is deeply dedicated to preservation, curation, advocacy, and this historical continuity from computer art and generative art, creating like archives and interviews. And then I believe when we were talking, you said that you started this after the NFT boom, when you felt the need, but you will tell us later. And then we have Ian, and like through the random that you built, and Raster, you both contextualized generative art historically, documented it, and really like created a context for it. Situated it like in a broader historical context. And also, like through Raster, you are building platforms and infrastructures for discoverability and navigation within the digital art ecosystem. And then we have GMSPACE, who is your position emerges more from like a really like a native Web3 presence, and where we all know the roles are much more fluid. And you are an artist and a collector. So this is, for instance, another example of how in Web3 everything is less strict as roles. And you are an active participant online and part of communities and ecosystems of trust, and they need visibility and like trust, cultural value, etc. So with all these other platforms or collections or really like communities that you have been building, the first question for all of you will be, why did you feel the need to participate in the digital art space in the way that you have been participating? And what did you feel that was missing in the ecosystem which pushed your contribution to be what it has been? Maybe Rani, you want to start since you're here?
Sure. I mean, we started our collection end of 2022, so it was right after the bubble burst, and it was important for us as an institution to bring this idea of trust and security. Because, I mean, you still hear it everywhere, NFTs are worthless, what are you doing there, why, etc. So the thing is, for us, is to prove that there's serious art behind it, that we can make things simple, and access to NFTs or digital art very simple. So trust is very important, and we cannot afford to have this trust disappear. It's been very hard to build it. It's a long time. It's been, what, 3-4 years now? And I think we still have a lot of things to do, but we're going the right way. The fact that we felt that our positioning was important. The institutions that we're talking with, for example, museums and art venues, that when they see a bank, an institution, a private bank in Switzerland on top of it, they tend to have a different feeling, and they tend to be reassured in a way that we went in and we're comfortable with what's going on. But it's very important to continue and not to have a slip up, because we could destroy everything very quickly.
Great, yeah. So I started 16, 17, I was involved with some of the crypto projects more from a technical perspective. But then, so I was there when the NFTs came along, and I was somewhat interested. The speculative was hard for me. It moved really fast. And so by my nature, I like to go slowly and try to understand the artwork. Where did it come from? I'm not good at picking things out quickly. I get wrapped up and carried away and do all the wrong things all the time. So I, by nature, when those started moving really fast and I was interested, just by nature said, well, I don't know, I guess, how to trust these and how to understand what's been done before, what's novel, what's just a money grab. So I started reading the histories, researching the works that came before. and was, surprised, I guess not surprised, but found out there was a full 75 years of computer and digital art, right? Started at the same time as computers in the 50s. And that's really been what I've been focusing on then since, because, in those 75 years, for 50, 60 of it, the art was really disparaged and was kind of tossed aside. So how can you trust when you don't know the stories, when many of the great works and artists were either forgotten or never recognized? So I spent a lot of time trying to understand the works from that period, to rediscover some of them, to find the artists that created those works, and try to help establish where the contemporary art is coming from. I think that's essential to the trust, understanding the context of these works, what's come before, what conversations have happened in the past, since so many of them were lost.
Yeah, for me, it's actually quite a similar story to Michael. I also came into this space, well, I was also in crypto a little bit before NFTs, then discovered digital art and generative art through NFTs. And back then, in 2021, 22, like the entire ecosystem was a lot like focused on novelty. Like everything was groundbreaking. Yes, exactly. The artist just before us on stage, DevBeef, actually made like a really fun project about it called the first NFTs. But yeah, I thought it was actually a bit annoying, and I thought we were doing ourselves a disservice by always emphasizing like all the novelties and almost rejecting or ignoring what happened before us. So with Lorandom, our goal was really to contextualize what was happening in NFTs and with on-chain generative art in art history, to show that many of the ideas are not necessarily new. So we shouldn't necessarily focus on them as like novel discoveries, but at the same time, other things are new and radical. And yeah, we can use the history to better understand what's happening in the present. And that's also what we try to do with our collection. We collect a lot of art from the pioneers of the movement, from people who are pushing the space forward in the early 2000s, also this generation of, let's say, blockchain native artists. So yeah, lots of overlap with Michael.
When I first entered the space, I came through architecture and technology. I was fascinated by the infrastructure, the blockchain, digital ownership, virtual worlds. But once I spent time with the people building it, I realized that the technology and infrastructure alone cannot create a movement. The blockchain can verify ownership, but it cannot make anyone care. So art needs context, it needs trust, it needs relationships, it needs people willing to spend time championing artists before anyone knows their names. That's why I participated beyond collecting, and for the past 6 years I've been spending my time learning from artists, attending events, connecting with people, and helping artworks find their audiences. I never saw collecting as a separate activity. For me, collecting is a form of participation.
Thank you. As you can see, it is very, I mean, there is common points, but it's very interesting on how in such a, there is the art world, and then there is the digital art world, and then there is the blockchain and art world, and of course, like starting with computer art, etc., like in history, but even like in this very little world that we are in, the position of our speakers, but also all the players are very different, all like coming to build, hopefully for the same vision, but in a very different way of participating. So, so yes, we said that like, so we talked about like how, like what you thought it was missing and why you participated like this, but like how are you actually contributing for what I was just saying, like to build trust in the space, because you are both like collectors and also like actively giving to the community and to other collectors spaces to actually find trust, which is also very interesting in this new space of art and technology, because people are often like taking and giving, or like collectors and artists, or like participating in a very not passive, but like like using the system and creating the system in at the same time. So for ABS, so the collection itself, as we said, also functions as a form of institutional and educational infrastructure. That's what you have been building. So not only for yourself, but like for your clients and for people who can have access either to your events or to your knowledge and what you provide. So how do you build trust around digital art for audiences and collectors who may initially approach NFTs primarily as financial assets? This is very interesting because you are a bank, and so if you provide that, like how, besides the investment part, then how do you actually, provide this trust?
I mean, first thing is to avoid talking about investments in the beginning. So we take it slowly. I mean, one stage people will consider it as an investment, but for me it's passion investing, and there's passion in it. So I will never tell a client, well, you need to put 10% of your assets in digital art or things like that. That's not the way it works. So if someone is not interested in art, there's no point in start talking about it. But it will come through education, through the events that we're doing, with the artists that are coming, the exhibitions that we're doing. So it's important to take it slowly and to build the credibility, and that's how we build trust. Because otherwise, if you take it too quick, too far, it will not work. And we have a duty to build things on the long term, and it's reflected also in the collection. I always say that the collection is not here to prove that it's value creating. It's to build a culturally relevant collection that will be there in 15 years or 20 years and will be seen as a culturally relevant collection. So this is what we're working on. And through that, obviously, you build the trust slowly and people will get interested and will come in. And our role is to make it very easy to take away this idea of opening a wallet, of the security, what I'm going to do, basic answers about how do I display my digital art. Is it only on a TV screen, or is it can be physical, etc. So this is our responsibility to do that, and we're doing it, and we're happily doing it. I'm lucky enough and privileged enough to be able to do what I love doing in my job. So we need to continue doing that, and it's very important to stress that things out, that we're talking about passion and art, and then afterwards all the things will come back.
I find it very interesting. It might seem something little, but the fact that when people like in the bank come to the bank and they actually see a collection of art exhibited in the bank, like physically, I find it pretty special as a first, touch point for people to have a relationship with it.
The thing is, if you look at the collection and how it moved, we started the first year, and the idea was to have the full spectrum of what you have in the ecosystem. So it's a point of entry of everybody. They look at the collection, they see what, then they can tell me, I like generative art, I don't like generative art, I like AI. Art is not the way to describe it, but let's say that was 2022 sort of labeling. And or I like digital photography. Everything is it's just a point of entry. That was the idea in the first year of the collection. Then it came more and more conceptual, and the fact that the bank is now a place, an exhibition, a permanent exhibition, and the ambition it's one of entry point for the clients, because I mean I happily do it because I love doing the guide and touring around the building with either client or new collaborators, because it's important also that in the bank they have a buy-in and they appreciate what we're doing. It's not only Rani in his office doing his things, weird things, and collecting weird art, and we don't know what he's doing, spending our money. The good thing is I also make the money, so they can't say anything. So that's the privilege of being head of treasury. So it's important that I want people to live and to work around the art. So that's the ambition. It's not always easy when you have open spaces. It's a bit the team at Basel Social Club. So, but that's the ambition that we have.
Thank you. Michael, so we said that a big, actually a huge part of Ragnar's digital is, and so its work is dedicated to preservation, archives, and historical continuity. So how much do you think that trust in digital art depends on the ability to preserve it? So not only to go back in history, but like to preserve it and to document it and place it in a, like what you're doing, like in a bigger context, like a historical context of computer and generative art. And what happens if we fail to do that properly?
Sure, okay. The first part is easier. So, there's a period, let's say from net art to today, that's pretty well understood and documented, and there are active organizations trying to keep that code alive. How is it presented? What's going on? Blockchain can give you the provenance. And then there's a small period, I'd say early, so maybe the early to mid 60s, when it's pretty well understood. There were several European artists that are well documented, have been known, are collected. And that's kind of where it ends to me, so there's this huge gap from the mid 60s to, let's say, 95, when the internet came around, where much of that art has been lost and much of it is unknown. So we've taken a big effort to try to find works from that period. So whether that's works from, say, the 60s, there was a lot of work being done in the US with like Bell Labs or with Charles Surrey, whose daughter is here today, through the 80s when a lot of mainstream artists started to adopt PCs and Macs. So there's all this artwork, and we spend a lot of time tracking down those artworks, trying to find the artists, and trying to preserve those works, because if they still exist, they're in someone's garage, right? They're in a box, the family has them. There are artists out there that don't even know that digital art has made a resurgence. So it's important to us, and we spend a lot of time finding those works, documenting those works, trying to understand the intent of the artist, to capture that, because if you don't know their intent, if you don't know how they programmed it, if you don't know what the computer was, it's really hard to give value to that work, to understand how that work was created. Even the algorithms, right? Because so much of digital art is driven by, especially the generative, from trying to preserve the algorithms. So we're starting to do a decent job with net art of preserving that. But what about things that were written in the 70s and 80s? How do we keep those algorithms alive? How do we capture how they were created so that we understand them going forward? And then that's important to digital art as a whole, right? Because you have to be able to have a conversation. You have to show how it works within the scope of all art and other mediums. And if you don't have that, it's hard to, I would say, bump us up into another echelon of art if we can't speak to the history of it and where it's come from.
What happens if we fail to do this?
It's going to happen, probably again, because what happened for 50 years was nobody cared. So there were artists that kept going just because they loved it. But if we don't capture that now, if we don't document these things and keep them alive and keep that trust alive, it happens again to me. We enter another period like that.
Thank you. So Ian, so Lerandom didn't only collect, as we said, generative art, but also created a big discourse around the publications, interviews, and historical contextualization. It's a similar question, like how much does contextualization itself build trust and cultural value around digital art? And do artworks become more legitimate when they are surrounded by narrative histories and critical discourse? Like how much does this help to consider it legit art?
Yes, our hypothesis is definitely that it's quite important that this work happens. Because I think I already said it like in the introduction, but we did get started like in this space when there was so much focus on novelty, and history was kind of discarded to some extent, or at least not like rigorously examined. So when we started Lerandom in 2022, from the start, it was clear to us that we're not just going to collect art. We're also going to put in the work to research the art, contextualize it, interview the artists. So over the years, that has led us to a few different initiatives. One is our timeline of generative art history, which all of you can visit on our website. It goes back actually, yeah, not just a few decades, but hundreds, even thousands of years in history to show that systems-based art is, yeah, not a novelty. And to be clear, like that's all the work of Monk Anthony, our editor-in-chief. So I can't take much credit for it. But he also worked on the editorial for almost every single week since 2022. He either interviews an artist or he writes even more, I would say, like art theoretical framework articles to help people understand and give them a framework to analyze generative art. So yeah, for us, we think these are all important things for the maturity of the art movement. And hopefully it helps artists who are active today to give more credibility to their work. And also, if they have an audience that is aware of the history, it might also be easier to like focus a conversation on the really novel aspects and what they're really trying to say with the work, and without them having to re-educate them every single time about what generative art is, where it comes from, those things.
Is it a need that came first for yourself? Like, I'm starting to collect digital generative art, so I need to actually not only understand but like build a context around it because of my collection, as like a need of a collector, or you were thinking about providing, you know, like something for other collectors and people to come, or both?
I would say a combination, but definitely also the personal need was also there. Because when I started collecting in 2021, I didn't have an art historical background. So I didn't know myself, like, which projects are really novel, which ones have kind of been done before, even aesthetically, like what is really interesting, what is not. And to understand that and to make sense of the current moment in time, I think the only thing you can do is look at the past and learn more about what has come before. But hopefully it's also useful to other people, of course.
It is, of course. Yeah, thank you. So GMSPACE. So the Web3 culture operates not completely different, but like he has its own very specific rules, which is also very interesting. And because of the way the trust emerges, which is often through like communities, participation, public collecting, but also, so you and I had this conversation. So we talked about, should we talk about anonymity? It is very interesting. In Web3, anonymity is a thing for collectors, for artists, for like all the players. And sometimes anonymity can play both ways. It can actually be like, it can build trust, or it can completely destroy trust. I don't know if you want to talk about it, but we talk about like, maybe PAC is an example of what happened. I think it's actually interesting to, you know, the phenomena of PAC and what happened, and all the collectors like actually like trusting this artist, and then what happened later.
Okay, so beyond infrastructure, trust works exactly the same it always has, through consistency over time, through what your actions reflect, not what you just claim to value, through showing up before something is valuable and after the attention shifts elsewhere. But it's different here because the record is public. What you collected, when, at what moment, what did you choose to stand behind? This creates a level of accountability that I think is also healthy. But still, like the strongest trust in the space didn't happen online. It happened offline at like dinners, conferences like this one. After spending with people, time with people in person, you quickly learn who they are. So technology creates transparency and people create trust. But if we talk about anonymity, in regards to anonymity, first of all, it was a foundation to the space. And some of the most important artists still today are anonymous. Some of the most important collectors are anonymous. The pseudonym is the position. It says judge the work and not the person. And for a while it felt like freedom for both the artist and the collector. But anonymity has a cost that only becomes visible when things go wrong. So I'm a big supporter and collector of Pac, and for those who don't know it, he's an anonymous artist, the highest selling digital artist ever, and some of the most conceptually serious artworks this space has produced. And then one day, silence, and now it has been for about 4 years now. And in the grand scheme of history, 4 years is nothing. Traditional artists have disappeared for much longer, but this space lives online. And when your entire presence and your relationship with collectors, your community and everything is built through that presence, silence is not neutral anymore. It's a statement. And the art is still there, the tokens still exist, but absence in this space is the biggest form of betrayal. So, but I'm still drawn to anonymous work. What anonymity gives you is something real. The work has to stand entirely on its own. No biography, no face, no story to lean on, just the art itself. So I think the question is not whether anonymity is good or bad, it's what obligations it comes with it. You can hide your identity, but you cannot hide your silence.
So this brings me to my next question, which I will also ask you, which is, it was about preservation, but like in Web3, preservation in Web3 also happens, of course it happens through the most amazing technology we have at today for preservation, which is the blockchain, but it really happens like through communities. So like, can you talk a little bit about this? For instance, like the CryptoPunks, of course, their preservation will happen technologically because of the blockchain, but what has been created around the punks is really like, you know, that communities, preservation into the future, present and future, for just what you said, that like the biggest betrayal that you can have in this space is silence and absence. You know, like to have CryptoPunks branch every event we go to have all these communities events around one single project is probably what, like, what do you think about this? What do you think about this kind of preservation?
So yeah, so generally, I personally don't have a punk, but I've been to many of these events, and I think the best events ever, because this is where everything happens. But the community is essential, I think, to preservation, because it also moves at the speed the space requires, because institutions can come and go, and they're always behind, and technologies change, platforms disappear. In regards to art, markets come and go. So I think the only constant in the space is the people who continue to care. So yeah, I think it's extremely important, and I'm glad that they're still around.
Thank you. And on the preservation, because obviously you can't really build trust if there isn't like a vision of preservation. I wanted to ask you, Ian, about Raster and what you do with that, because you also mentioned that you do backup of collectors, like collections.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so Raster, for those who don't know, it's a pretty new digital art platform where, well, the core principle of Raster is that every artist has one profile, and this one profile should hold all their work. And that's because of a different problem that I also found like quite annoying in the space is the fragmentation. Yeah. Because over the years, like so many platforms showed up, artists are, yeah, they are very keen to participate in new development and mint on new platforms, mint on different blockchains, do collaborations with shared wallet addresses. Like it's over time it grew quite complex, and our goal is to bring some simplicity back and aggregate all the work and make it very easy to find and discover digital art. And as a side effect, like we've built up this massive database of more than 10 million artworks, tens of thousands of artists. And this year, many platforms decided to shut down. Nifty Gateway, Foundation. With every shutdown, there was a lot of even controversy about it and about how the team handled the preservational aspects of the shutdown. So as we had the data, we decided that every single collector on Raster will have backups made of their collection, which is, to be clear, like it's not like an ultimate solution at all. Like we're not going to preserve like the entire digital art space. It's really like a community effort, and real preservation really requires redundancy and requires networks to work together. But it's for us at least like a small thing that we can do to help preserve the works. And in very practical terms, that means that well, if the work is fully on-chain, we don't make a backup. But if the work is off-chain, that means it's either on IPFS or Arweave or maybe on centralized servers. Then we make a full backup of the work, and not just the image file, but also the software, if it's a software piece, the dependencies that the software piece requires. But thank you. But we've also come to realize that it's not necessarily a perfect solution, as I said, because if the work points to a centralized server, then even if we have the files, we cannot restore it because we don't have access to the server. So the work might still go down. But I've also come to realize that that's maybe not as big of an issue as people sometimes think, because it's also artist intent, and not every single work has to be preserved forever. And there are some projects like, for example, Bloemenveiling by Anna Riddler, which is impermanent by design. So trying to restore it would actually go against the artist intent. Yeah, and then there's also other artists who have a very different take on permanence. For example, Harm van den Dorpel, the Dutch net art pioneer. Most of his projects point to centralized servers. And for him, like, he's fine with the work not being like fully immutable on-chain. If anything, he's happy that he still has access to the server, that he can change the work if, in his opinion, it requires a change. Because that's something that's super difficult with software works, is that there is the software, there is the files, but there's also the runtime, there's the environment, there's the browsers that people use to look at the work. But these are entirely outside of an artist's control. And we actually already have some works in Lorandom's collection where the work is still intact, but Chrome and Chromium-based browsers have moved on to a different standard, and something breaks in the work, and the work is now not renderable on Chrome, but you can still see it on Firefox and Safari. So is the work broken? Partially, I guess, because you can't view it on Chrome, which is the go-to browser, but it's not entirely broken. And yeah, for some artists, like having centralized servers means that they can intervene when such a moment occurs. And as long as the artist is alive, that might be a better form of preservation than just having it fully on IPFS or things like that.
Thank you for what you're doing for the community. This is a big topic. I want to say that we 100 Collectors, we started a collaboration. We right-click save, and we are doing portraits of collectors every 2 months. And the first portrait of collector, I interview our collector, Edouard, and we talked about preservation. So I invite you to read. I have the last questions for Michael and Rani, which will be also the elephant in the room. But very quickly, so we talked about trust. Who do you collect from? Like artists, institutions, galleries, and how do you think, very quickly, that, for instance, the presence of purely like dedicated digital art sector inside something like Art Basel can change the way that you collect, like who you collect from, and the entire perspective on trust?
Sure. Yeah, I'll go first. So there's really, as far as acquiring works, there are really 3 avenues that we go after for the historical work. So there's the traditional galleries and auctions for the better known works. It's pretty straightforward. A second, more interesting way to me is through the artists that are still alive, or through their estates, which is usually their children. There's a large number, actually, of children of the pioneering artists who are trying to still make sure those stories are written, and that's a big part of what we do. We try to write essays about them. We try to bring them forward, give them recognition, help people understand these works that happen. So it's a lot of time going through boxes and garages, helping even the children sometimes of artists from like the 80s understand that their parents' work, maybe at the time no one appreciated it, but it is important, and we need to bring it forward, and helping them understand how to do that. And then the third and hardest way is there are still works that no one knows about because they were discarded for so long. So one example is we spent the last year doing a big project trying to assemble a collection of South American early computer art from the late 60s. And there were about 7 or 8 artists that all worked out of 2 different mainframes in South America. And they were all short-lived for the most part. They did this work for 1 or 2 years, and then they all moved on with their art careers. But there's a collection of maybe 20 works that were created on mainframes in the late 60s. And they're beautiful works. They rival anything from any other countries. But they're incredibly hard to find, and the artists are long gone, and the works were typically not saved. So we have to work with, a lot of the times in that kind of situation, we'll find someone, in this example, we found someone in Buenos Aires. She was an art collector and a dealer. That helped us track down about a dozen of those works we were able to find over the year. And so we just partner with people the best we can. They're really hard to find sometimes. So.
Yeah, I mean, there's marked change. It changed the way we acquire art has been changing very quickly. If we compare to the first year was mainly on the secondary market. So since then, the collection evolved, our connection evolved. So we started collecting directly from artists, from galleries, or directly from collectors. I mean, for instance, the CryptoPunk that we bought it directly. We wanted to have it from an OG who minted the CryptoPunks originally in the first place. It didn't go through the marketplace. So this is what we're trying to do and build lately. I don't think we've been buying this year on OpenSea or on the secondary market directly. So there's a major change. But come back to the topic of trust and security. For me, security is also about preserving the work or controlling the narrative, because the easy narrative is that blockchain is immutable. If it's not, we have to say it. I mean, that's very important. If, for example, the artist did it on purpose, or etc., because we will break this trust, and we have a collective responsibility here as collectors or actors in the ecosystem that the preservation is there, and then we not get it wrong in the terms of narrative. So preservation is extremely important. We cannot say to people, yes, blockchain is great, it's immutable, your work will be preserved forever, and they discover it's not. And there's nothing worse than that if you want to break the trust.
Well, thank you to the speakers. Thank you, everyone.
If you guys would just sit for a second, we'll break in a second. So thank you guys so much. This was really great to hear all the different, the styles, the processes. Everyone here is taking this very seriously. Maybe some people fell into it in 2021, but here we are 5 years later, and it's really amazing to see how time and trust and taste is developing. Just want to let you guys know that we're going to take a 40-minute break, so you can grab some lunch. Also, I encourage if you catch up with people, maybe some of the people that you saw speak today as well. This afternoon we have an amazing program as well. We have another 5 different panels. This will include Alexandra from Trilitech, from Tezos, and Greta, and they're going to talk about the art of self and promotion and privacy on a networked world. We also then have net art pioneers. We have Miltos and Despoina as well this afternoon. Sorry about that. And then we also have a really amazing session on masterpieces too. So we'll have Christiana Paul, Alex from Right Click Save, Caroline Surrey from the Charles Surrey Estate. You want to hear about that. Michael Spalter and Marguerite Rosen. So that's going to be a really, really special historical panel, because we're going to have some really amazing voices coming together for the first time. And then we're going to look at about long-term investment and sort of relationships. There's a special relationships between Sam Spratt and Benny Redbeard. So we're going to hear more about their special relationship that they have and the investment that they have. And Judy's going to moderate that. And then finally, today we're going to have a really special thing, is because this is really great that things have evolved at 010. It's been traveling in Miami. Just was in Hong Kong, I was there. But there's a special edition of it here in Basel. And it also includes some really amazing works, including ArtMeta's presentation of this amazing catalog of historical works. So you're not going to want to miss that. But the co-curators for that, Trevor Peglin and Eli Scheinman, are going to be here with Marlene. So that's how we're going to end the program this afternoon. Thank you for everyone that's come thus far. It's been really an amazing journey, and I hope you guys come back in 40 minutes where we can continue the conversation. But thank you guys too, because without you, we can't have this dialogue. Thank you guys very much.